If you have a strange experience, send it to us. Your story might be featured in one of our next videos. Beneath the surface of the water, there are things that were never meant to exist. Things that defy all logic, all science, all reason. In March 2023, I found one of those things. 154 feet below the surface, inside an underwater cave in Mexico. What I saw in that chamber changed everything I believed about reality. And the worst part, it wasn't the impossible manifesting before my eyes. The worst part was realizing that I wasn't the first one to find it, and that all the others were still there. My name is Webb. I've been a technical diver for 12 years, specializing in submerged caves, cenotes in Mexico, grottos in Florida, cave systems in Thailand, if it's dark, tight, and underwater. I've probably been there. I don't do it for the adrenaline. I do it for the science. I'm a marine geologist. I study underwater rock formations, mineral deposition, and hydric systems. My work helps us understand how water carves the earth over millions of years. In March 2023, I was contacted by a Mexican colleague, Dr. Carlos Ruiz. He had discovered an entrance to an unmapped cave system near Tulum. Sonar scans showed something unusual. A massive chamber, maybe 160 feet in diameter, at a depth of approximately 154 feet. "Marcus," he said in the email, "the readings are strange. The chamber shouldn't exist at that depth, not with that geological formation. I need someone to go down and document it." I arrived in Mexico on March 15th. Carlos met me at a small hotel near the coast. He showed me the sonar data and the preliminary maps. "The entrance is narrow," he explained. "About 2 feet wide, maybe 50 feet long. Then it opens into a larger tunnel that slopes down. That tunnel leads to the chamber. Water composition? Fresh for the first 100 feet. Then it turns brackish. There's a well-defined halocline." He paused. "Marcus, there's something else. The temperature in the chamber is 15 degrees colder than it should be. We don't know why." That piqued my interest. Thermal anomalies usually indicate deep water springs or unusual underground currents. It could be a major discovery. We planned the dive for March 17th. It would be solo. Just me. Carlos would stay on the surface as support, monitoring me via underwater radio for as long as the signal reached. I carried 2 12-liter tanks with trimix, a primary light and 2 backups, a reel with 300 feet of guideline, a GoPro on my helmet, and all the standard safety gear. Estimated bottom time, 90 minutes, including decompression stops. On the morning of the 17th, the sky was perfectly clear. Calm water. Ideal conditions. I should have realized that perfect conditions are often a warning. I hit the water at 9:37 a.m. The first 50 feet were through crystal clear water, that typical turquoise blue of Mexican cenotes. Sunlight piercing through, small fish swimming around. Beautiful. Peaceful. The cave entrance was exactly where Carlos said it would be. A dark fissure in the rock wall, like an open mouth in the stone. "Marcus, confirm visual on entrance." Carlos's voice crackled through the underwater radio. "Confirmed. Commencing penetration." I turned on my primary light, a 3,000 lumen beast, and began to reel out the guideline, tying it to a protruding rock outside the entrance. That line was my way back. My life. The passage was tight. Very tight. I had to take the tank off my back and push it ahead of me, dragging myself forward with my arms. The limestone walls scraped against my wetsuit. There was no room to turn around, only forward or backward. My breathing echoed through the regulator. Bubbles rose and hit the rocky ceiling above me. The beam of my light showed nothing but grey stone and murky water ahead. 30 feet into the passage. 50 feet. The space was so confined that I started to feel the psychological pressure, that sensation that the walls are closing in, that you're going to get stuck. I took a deep breath. Slow. Controlled. Panic kills divers faster than anything else. 60 feet in. The passage began to widen. I managed to get the tank back onto my back. And then it opened up. I emerged from the fissure into a tunnel about 10 feet wide. The relief was immense. I continued my descent, the guide line unspooling behind me, leaving a thin white trail in the dark void. 100 feet deep. I crossed the halocline, the layer where fresh water meets salt. Everything turned blurry for a moment, like looking through gelatin, then cleared again. The temperature plummeted. I felt it even through my 5mm wetsuit. 115 feet. The tunnel began to slope down at a sharper angle. 130 feet. My lights revealed stalactites on the ceiling, evidence that this cave had been dry in the past, perhaps thousands of years ago. 145 feet. "Marcus, do you copy?" Carlos's voice was broken, distorted by interference. At this depth, inside the rock, the radio signal could barely reach. "Yes, Carlos. Approach. Main chamber." "Copy. If signal. Lost. Return immediate." And then the radio died. Just static, then silence. I was alone. 154 feet deep, the tunnel ended abruptly, opening into space. My light couldn't reach the walls. It couldn't reach the ceiling. It was like floating in an absolute void. Nothing but darkness in every direction, with a small circle of light around me. The chamber. I swam forward slowly, arching to map the space. My light finally found the wall, maybe 80 feet away. I continued the circle. The chamber was massive, oval-shaped, maybe 130 by 160 feet, and cold, absurdly cold. My dive computer read 52 degrees Fahrenheit. At that depth, in that region, it should have been around 68 degrees Fahrenheit. I started documenting with the GoPro, filming the walls, the ceiling about 30 feet above me, and the floor. The floor. I pointed the light down, and my blood turned to ice. 4:30 to 7. There were things on the cave floor, not rocks, not natural formations. Diving gear, tanks, masks, fins, regulators. At least 5 sets, maybe 6, scattered across the rocky bottom like abandoned toys. And among them, bones. No, not just bones. Complete skeletons, still inside their deteriorating wetsuits. "What the hell?" The words came out as a whisper, muffled by my regulator. I descended slowly until I was about 10 feet from the floor. My light passed over each body. 5 that I could see clearly, maybe more in the shadows. Some were on their backs, as if they had just laid down and gone to sleep. Others were face down. One was sitting against the wall, head slumped forward. There were no signs of a struggle, no marks on the gear indicating failure, just people who had stopped and died. Right here, in this chamber, 154 feet below the surface. My mind went into analytical mode, the only way to keep from panicking. I checked the visible gear, old models, 90s, maybe early 2000s. The wetsuits were rotted but still recognizable. 5 divers. They all died here. They were all left here. Why? Why didn't anyone recover the bodies? Why wasn't this cave closed off, marked as a death site? And the most important question, how did they all die at the same time? Divers don't die in groups like that. If one person has a problem, the others help. They ascend. They seek rescue, unless something happened to all of them simultaneously. I checked my air. I still had 180 bar, enough time to investigate a bit more and ascend with a safety margin. I swam along the chamber wall, documenting everything. The walls were too smooth. Not naturally smooth, but as if they had been polished, sanded down by something. And then I saw the marks, scratches, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, small, made with knives or something sharp, covering an entire section of the wall like mad graffiti. I got closer. They weren't random. They were words, phrases, numbers, scraped into the rock with evident desperation. I can't get out. The line is gone. I've been here for 3 hours, running out of air. Carlos, if you find this. Mom, forgive me. A wave of pure terror hit me. They had been trapped. Somehow, all of them had been trapped here, and they had scraped final messages while their air ran out. My breathing quickened. I forced it to slow down. Panic consumes air. Air is life. I looked for my guideline. There it was, white and clear, stretched from the tunnel entrance to where I was floating. My way back. I was fine. I was safe. I had a line. I had air. But what if? I swam to the entrance of the tunnel I'd come from. The guideline led into it, clear and visible. I took the line in my hand. It was freezing, colder than the surrounding water, and it was vibrating very slightly, as if something on the other end was pulling it, testing it. No, it's just the current. It has to be the current, but there was no current. The water was completely still. I looked into the tunnel. My light penetrated about 30 feet into the darkness. Nothing but rock and water. I went back into the chamber. I needed to understand. I had to know what had happened. I swam to the nearest skeleton, the one sitting against the wall. The wetsuit was in shreds, but there was something attached to the BCD, a slate. Technical divers carry waterproof slates to take notes. I picked it up carefully, trying not to touch the bones. There was writing on it. The handwriting was shaky, desperate. Hour 1. Guideline disappeared. Can't find the entrance. Searched for all 5 of us. It's not there. Hour 2. Air at 90 bar. Roberto is panicking. Tried different tunnels. All end in solid rock. Impossible. Hour 3. 40 bar. Lena is unconscious. The cold is increasing. It shouldn't be this cold. Hour 4. 15 bar. I see things in the shadows. Movement where there shouldn't be movement. The others see it too. Hour 5. Air is out. Roberto and Miguel are already gone. I still see movement. Getting closer. God, please don't let. The writing ended in an irregular streak. My hands were shaking so hard I almost dropped the slate. Movement in the shadows. Getting closer. I turned off my light. The darkness that swallowed me was absolute. Complete. It wasn't just the absence of light. It was a physical presence, pressing against my eyes, invading my mind. I counted to 10, forcing myself to stay calm, looking around, searching for any light source, any bioluminescence, anything, nothing, just total darkness. I turned the light back on, and I nearly screamed. The skeletons had moved. No, it wasn't possible. I was floating. The current, but there was no current. It was my imagination. It had to be. But the skeleton that had been on its back was now on its side, and the one that was sitting, its head was turned in my direction. Stop it. You're panicking. You're seeing things. Breathe. I breathed. 1, 2, 3. I checked my air. 140 bar. I still had time. I had to get out. Now. I swam back to the tunnel entrance, following my guideline. It was there. Solid. Real. I entered the tunnel, and the guideline ended. 10 feet from the entrance, it ended in a frayed knot, the ends unfurling in the water, as if someone had cut it. No, this wasn't happening. I yanked on the guideline, hoping it was just snagged on something that it would give and continue. But no, the ends floated free. Cut. Finished. My lifeline. My way back. Gone. Exactly like what happened to them. My breathing spiked. Panic, real, visceral, consuming, began to rise from my stomach to my throat. Calm down. Calm down. You know the way. You came in a straight line. Just swim in a straight line back. I swam through the tunnel, my light scanning the walls, searching for the narrow passage, the 2-foot fissure that was the exit. The tunnel kept going and going and going. I should have reached the passage in 100 feet. I'd already swum 130, 160. The walls began to narrow, getting tighter, but it wasn't the right passage. The rocks were different. The slope was wrong. Wrong tunnel. I turned back, swam back to the chamber, looked for another tunnel. I was absolutely sure which one I'd use to enter, but there were 4 tunnels leading out of the chamber. 4. When I entered, I only saw one. Impossible. You would have seen them, you would have noticed. But there they were. 4 dark openings in the walls, all looking identical. I checked my air with trembling hands. 110 bar. It was becoming critical. With the depth and the mandatory decompression stop, I needed at least 60 bar to ascend safely. I chose the tunnel furthest to the left. Swam 130 feet. It ended in a solid wall. I went back. Tried the next one. 160 feet. Solid wall, 85 bar. Panic now. Total panic. My breathing was coming in gasps, consuming precious air, but I couldn't control it. I was trapped, exactly like them, 154 feet down in the dark, with no way out. I tried the 3rd tunnel. 100 feet. Wall, 60 bar. It wasn't enough. Even if I found the exit now, I might not have enough air for the decompression stops. If I went straight up, I'd get an embolism, decompression sickness, death or permanent paralysis. I was dying, here, in this cave. Like the 5 before me, I went back to the chamber, my light swinging wildly with my frantic movements, and that's when I noticed. In the center of the chamber, where before there had been only black water, there was something different. The water was moving, no current, no reason. Slow, hypnotic ripples, as if something immense were breathing just beneath the visible surface. I aimed my light directly at the center, and I saw it. It wasn't a thing. It was the water itself. It was wrong. Pale patches floated in the water column, translucent, organic, like suspended membranes, and inside them, bubbles, hundreds of tiny bubbles rising in impossible patterns, not in straight lines, but in spirals, coordinated waves, and every bubble reflected my light back at me, like eyes. No, I thought. Narcosis. It's just nitrogen narcosis. I'm at 155 feet. It's too deep. But then I heard it. Not with my ears, inside my head, behind my own thoughts, whispers. Help! I can't get out. So cold. Mom, please. Running out of air. I don't want to die here. I shook my head violently. Water. Just water getting through the regulator. But no. The regulator was fine. It was gas. It had to be gas. Methane, hydrogen sulfide, something toxic escaping from the rocks, dissolved in the water, entering my system. But the whispers continued, and they were so real. Voices I knew, not personally, but I recognized them. The Argentine accent, the broken German, the Brazilian Portuguese, the dead divers, their last words, their last thoughts. somehow recorded here, in this water, in this place. I looked at my pressure gauge. 40 bar, 15 minutes of air, maybe less. I backed away. My breathing was accelerating, consuming precious air. I spun 180 degrees to head back to the entrance, and I saw again 4 tunnels. 4. But which one was the real one? Narcosis, I said out loud, hearing my own voice muffled by the regulator. It's narcosis. You're confused. Pick one, go. But which one? Choosing wrong meant death. It meant swimming down a dead end until the air ran out. It meant becoming the 6th skeleton in this chamber, or the 20th, or the 100th. The whispers grew louder. Stay. Don't go. Stay with us. In the dark. Forever. 35 bar. I felt something touch my foot. I spun around. Nothing. Just water. Just darkness beyond the reach of my light. But I felt it. Cold. Soft. Like fingers. It touched me again, my ankle this time. I looked down. Nothing. But I felt it. I felt invisible hands. Cold, multiple hands, climbing up my legs. It's not real, I screamed inside my mind. It's a hallucination, toxic gas, oxygen deprivation. But my body didn't believe it. My body knew something was wrong, something in this water, in this cave, something that didn't want to let me out. I backed up until I hit the wall, and I felt it. Behind me, a current, cold, strong, pulling. I turned. There was a crack in the wall, small, almost invisible, and water was being sucked through it. A strong, steady current. An exit. It had to be an exit. But the crack was maybe 15 inches wide. I'd have to take off my tank. I'd have to squeeze through. And the voices were screaming now. No! Stay! Don't go! They weren't whispers anymore. They were screams. Desperate, furious, and the bubbles, the hundreds of bubbles, all of them moving toward me, forming patterns, faces, hands, reaching. I made the decision in half a second. I stripped the tank off my back, keeping the regulator in my mouth. I pushed the cylinder through the crack. It barely fit. The pale patches were 10 feet away. The water around them was becoming viscous, thick, as if it were alive. I squeezed into the crack. The rocks tore my wetsuit. I felt skin being ripped from my shoulders, my hips. Something touched my fin. Cold, soft, holding on. I kicked again, and I was through. On the other side, the current pulled me violently. I grabbed the tank blindly and strapped it back on. The current dragged me through a narrow, jagged tunnel. I slammed against the walls. My flashlight shattered, total darkness. But the current kept going, pulling upward, 100 feet, 80 feet, 60 feet, 20 bar. I needed to do decompression stops, but if I stopped, I might not have enough air to reach the surface. 50 feet, 10 bar. I chose to live, with an embolism, with pain, but to live. I went straight up, 15 feet, 3 bar, light above. Sunlight. I broke the surface at 11:43 a.m. Carlos was 60 feet away on the boat, screaming into the radio. I swam to the boat, barely able to move my arms. He pulled me in. Marcus, what the hell happened? You were down there for 2 hours. The radio died and... Get me out of here. My voice was a rasp. Get me out of here now. Carlos took me straight to a hyperbaric chamber in Playa del Carmen. I spent 6 hours inside. Luckily, I didn't have a severe embolism, just joint pain that lasted weeks. While I was in the chamber, Carlos investigated. He came back with documents, files he found in the local diving association's records. Marcus, he was pale. That cave system, it's not new. He showed me. Reports dated 1997, a group of 5 Argentine divers, Vanished while exploring an underwater cave near Tulum. Bodies never found. 2005. 3 German divers. Same area. Missing. 2006. 2 Americans. 2007. 4 Brazilians. 2008. A lone Frenchman. 2009. 2 Mexicans. All missing. All in the same general area. All in unmapped cave systems that appeared and then vanished. The entrances shift, Carlos said, his voice trembling. That's what the locals say. There are Mayan legends about caves that move, that call to people, that feed. I tried to show him the GoPro footage. Or I tried to. The first 40 minutes were there. The descent, the chamber, the skeletons. But when it got to the part with whatever that was, the recording was corrupted. Just static, as if something had erased it on purpose. Only the last 30 seconds were intact. It showed me being dragged by the current, the light breaking, darkness. And in the last frame before the camera died, behind me, in the blackness of the water, bubbles, hundreds of tiny bubbles, forming a pattern that looked like a face, watching me leave. I never went cave diving again. I never went back to Mexico, but sometimes in the dead of night I still hear them, the whispers. Stay. Come back. Don't go. I consulted doctors, neurologists, psychiatrists specialized in diving trauma. They all said the same thing: nitrogen narcosis, CO2 poisoning, hypoxia, hallucinations caused by panic and depth. All explainable, they said. Your mind created a narrative to process the trauma. And I want to believe that. I really do. But then I remember the corrupted footage. I remember the 4 tunnels where there had only been one. I remember the skeletons that moved. And I remember the sensation, those cold, invisible hands gripping my leg. It wasn't a hallucination. Or was it? Carlos closed off access to that area, marked it as an extreme risk zone. But I know it doesn't matter, because 3 months later, 2 Canadian divers disappeared, 10 miles from there, in a newly discovered cave. Bodies never found. And 6 months after that, a British instructor. Same story. The cave moves. It appears somewhere else, with a different entrance, waiting, and some curious, confident, experienced diver is going to find it. They'll go down, and they'll discover what I discovered, that there is something down there. Maybe it's a natural phenomenon. Toxic gases escaping the rocks, methane pockets creating hallucinations, underground currents that move bones and alter formations. Maybe. Or maybe there is something else, something ancient, something that lives in the dark, something that collects, not bodies, memories, the last desperate thoughts of those who die down there, recorded, trapped, repeating forever, 155 feet deep, in the silent chamber, where no one can hear you die, where no one can hear you scream, where you become just one more voice, whispering in the dark, forever.